I know for our team, we've been coming into the studio Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we've kind of like asked folks to come in for some core days so that we can have some time together, but then also have that flexibility to, if we need to be out of the office on those days, it's okay. And Mondays and Fridays, people can work where they're most comfortable. So it's, everyone's trying to find a balance, but so far it's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And especially within creative work where it makes sense to have synchronous time together to just build a relationship with the team, see the skills, and see what someone else is working on. Like it's really hard and so easy to
Yeah.
get stuck in your own head.
Especially when it comes to like helping those younger designers develop in their careers and their skills and talent and expertise. It's like you can create the most robust training program or whatever, but um, nothing quite beats just hands-on learning. And I think in our industry in particular, where there is no hard and fast, like, here's your checklist, you go do this, like, learn these items, and then you're a professional. Um, it becomes more and more important to be able to have that face-to-face contact with folks, to be able to show them like, hey, come over, bring your chair over, let's look at this as I do it. It's not an official training session or anything, but you can learn on the job. As far as that goes, it's a lot better, I
Yeah.
think.
How has that been for, I guess, kind of not even young staff, but just newer staff who don't know your team? How has that worked through the pandemic?
I mean, it's been a challenge over, like, when we were all quarantined. I think that was a lot harder. I was with a different team then, but at the same principles apply, in that incidental contact of like hearing what someone's saying during a phone call, and then being able to ask a question later, like, I heard you say this to a fabricator or a contractor, like, what, tell me why, like, help me understand what made you want to do that. And there's always reasons, but it's just a little less fluid, I think, and there are more gaps when you're not face to face. So I was really glad for our team to come back together at least a couple days a week. As we're, as leader of our group, I'm very focused on just helping my team develop their individual careers, which I hope will be with our firm for a very, very long time. But regardless, I feel a sense of responsibility to like help them grow in their career and in their development. Um, so there's moments that pop up every day in one way or another where you can help someone learn something more.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's really hard to recreate that sort of serendipity that occurs in an office remotely. Did you even try to do that, or did you come up with new tactics to stay in touch?
Sure. It just was a little more forced.
Hmm.
There's you still, like, as seniors, as leaders, as design directors, we have responsibility to develop our teams. Um, and that's one I take really seriously. So you just have to be a bit more intentional about it. And it's maybe more in catching mistakes and then addressing the mistakes that you see versus having that incidental contact where you can give someone a little bit more direction or guidance before the mistake is made.
Gotcha. What kind of mistakes are we talking?
Not big ones, just, best practice. And again, I think in our industry, because there's no rule book, right? There's no like, yes, you go do a 4-year degree in EGD and you graduate a professional and you know all the things. It doesn't exist. So everybody comes at it from a different perspective, and the leveling that happens in filling in the gaps of your knowledge and helping someone develop is really individual. One person might be technically strong and need help on creative. Another person might be really strong with the creative aspects and has never used a particular program before. So you need to train on that. So, um, yeah, just best practice. And I think even the definition of what's best practice for our field is not defined, right? There are no kind of universally accepted standards of practice for EGD to say this person has met all of the minimum qualifications to say they know what they're talking about, right? They are a professional within our field. That's not out there. We all just define it for ourselves. And while there's a lot of consensus across the industry, it's still things we're continue to define every day.
So if people don't have like a 4-year program in EGD and then they could just go and work at a company, where are they coming from? What's their background?
That's a great question. So I'm finding the majority of folks are coming from a graphic design background. Some are coming from industrial design, some come from interior design, some come from architecture. Those are our unicorns, the folks who have architecture and graphic design. Woo! Gotta watch out for those guys. So you need to sort of fill in the gaps of their previous education and expertise based on where they came from. So someone from architecture or interior design background I don't need to teach them how to read plans or how to get an elevation or what materials make sense or maybe even what the code is, but they may need way more support on things like typography and graphic composition and illustration technique, like those things that are outside their wheelhouse. And the same is true for, the boatload of folks who are coming from a graphic design perspective. They're really strong with typography and color theory and composition and storytelling, but they know nothing about architecture. So then you need to fill in those gaps. So I think it really is pretty individual where people are coming from. And I think it's actually pretty cool about our industry as a whole is that you can get to it from so many different paths, which I think becomes more inclusive approach, right? Even if you don't have a 4-year degree at all, you could still become a professional within our industry through, maybe shorter periods of study, maybe self-learning. There's plenty of self-taught designers and folks who just learn on the job and take a particular area of expertise, right? Or folks that come from tech or, a variety of different ways. So I think in that aspect, our industry is maybe more inclusive than some in that there's no, you don't need to go do a 4-year degree in order to gain entry to this world, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot less, I guess, gatekeeping, if you will, and
Mm-hmm.
much more acceptance knowing that people are coming from vastly different experiences. Are there any patterns that you've noticed of what kind of people are attracted to the EGD world?
Um, so because I think it's just people who are interested in that hybrid of architecture and maybe a more traditional graphic design approach who are interested in that space between. Um, so I wouldn't say there's a particular kind of person who's attracted to it, but architects who are really inspired by graphic design end up here, graphic designers who can think beyond the page and are really interested in a more immersive experience end up here. And I would say maybe the one common trait they have is curiosity, right? Of seeing how those things fit together and having an open mind in knowing that there are no hard and fast rules necessarily beyond code compliance.
Gotcha. Do people then stay in EGD and start to further specialize, or do some of them leave and try to, do core and shell or, other types of things related to architecture?
I mean, I've seen some people over my experience kind of float in and out, like an interior designer who started in interiors, got really interested in the graphics side of things, tried the hat on of EGD, decided they'd prefer to stay within an interiors realm. Same with an architect. I haven't talked to many people who started in graphic design and went to EGD and decided it wasn't for them. So maybe I'm biased, but I think it's like a level up.
No, I think you're right. It's compounding existing experiences that work well in that path. I think I always like drawing a Venn diagram of people who can draw a concrete footing detail and people know how to set type. And if you're in the middle of it, you're a rare breed that we're looking for. And it's so hard to find. Like you always have to teach one or the other.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Depending on where the person's coming from.
yeah. What's your
So
approach to bridging that information gap?
Well, I mean, this is something I'm currently putting some effort into helping to define for our teams. Um, because as I mentioned, there's no standards of practice. There's no checklist to say, yep, you made it, you know what you're doing. I've been working internally with some team and with some other sort of senior folks within SEGD, just kind of ad hoc to be like, okay, can we all collaborate on a checklist, like a skills matrix of some kind to say, like, when you have reached the top of your game, you're going to fully know all these things, or at least 75% of them, right? Because we have areas of specialty. And so that's kind of a work in progress, but I think it's a tool I've been hungry for in regards to helping my team in their career development, their individual career development. So if, for instance, like in our Seattle studio, we're not doing a ton of wayfinding and signage projects. But I do believe that someone who is at a senior level in an EGD career is at a disadvantage if they've never done a signage and wayfinding project. Like, that's a thing you should understand. That's a core sort of area of our field that you've got to at least know the basics and have done one or two before you can consider yourself like fully cooked, fully formed. um, and so in that regard, it's just understanding as people onboard to your team or you're recruiting or hiring is just what previous experience do you have? Is that an area that you've ever learned about before, had an opportunity to practice? And if not, like, how can I get that opportunity for you? Even if it means like pursuing a new project type that maybe we weren't going to otherwise. Or with our firm, we have, you know, a variety of different studios and 40 plus experiential designers across our firm. Maybe it's like doing a team member swap for the course of a project so that I can help that person get the experience that they otherwise wouldn't have, and that I think would make them a better, more well-rounded designer in the end.
Got it. That makes sense to try to fill it through practical experience. I think a lot of this, you can kind of read about it, but it doesn't really click until you see it in action.
Yeah, and honestly, on the job training is where we're at with our field. That's how everybody learns everything. So for me, it's like going over the cycle of a project. You know, if you're at concept phase and someone's unfamiliar with ways of doing mood boards and concepting and, you know, sort of concept statements and all of that, then I'm like, okay, noted. Let's spend some time bolstering you up in this area. Same with technical skill, same with detailing for documentation and construction administration. You know, just yesterday there was an email that floated past and I was like, oh, we returned a submittal like that. Huh. Okay. And schedule a little 30 minutes with the team. All right, let's get everybody on board with, you know, just some best practices. And again, it's not something that's written down anywhere. It's just how I approach it. And after 20 years in the field, the things I think are important in order to protect us and protect our client and protect the design intent. And so things like that come up all the time where you're just like, we could do this better. We could enhance this. We could be more uniform in how we do things.
Yeah. What would your ideal version of that look like? Are you thinking codified systems or just all hands meetings?
I mean, if I like a small group huddle with a real practical example from a project that's current and ongoing so that it is incredibly relevant. So to be able to say, like, I saw this submittal go yesterday and I have some ideas on how as a group we should all uniformly like level up on that, how we're responding to that, and here's why. So I think that works really well.
Yeah. How do you prevent that information from getting lost?
That's a good question. I don't really have a way of doing that. I just, you know, I feel like on the job training is something that we all share responsibility for. So, you know, this submittal review I'm giving as an example, I noticed it, said, okay, let's have a meeting. I quickly like grabbed a couple of examples from what I had done, wrote a few bullet points, set it as a meeting invitation. We're going to meet this afternoon. We're going to go over it. And then my expectation is that each person in my team is going to take responsibility for retaining that information for themselves, writing their own shorthand notes or applying it immediately, coming back for questions. Like, I do think it's a shared responsibility. I'm not going to write a textbook about my preference for submittal reviews, but
Yeah, I'd probably be like one of the only people to read it if you did do that. But I've definitely seen
don't
teams
hold your
try.
breath. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I'd rather have like, another 10 of those little huddles where we get together and I'm able to answer questions and it's less formal and more hands-on.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because the information has to be relevant for it to stick, and that's kind of in the moment. We spoke briefly about this last time, but I mentioned that the term in architecture, we say that it's a mentor-based profession, and it sounds
Yeah,
like you really take that to heart, that you are leading the
absolutely.
way, knowing that they're not necessarily there yet, but you're trying to help them get to where they want to be. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some steps to do that. And there's no book, there's no like
No, there's no
no
text,
answer.
there's no program, there's no degree saying, yep, check the box. So it is, I think, a big responsibility for all the different leaders within the different firms and groups within our field to just make sure that they are investing the time in their people to help them develop, right? Because that not only adds value for them as individual designers or your group, but our industry as a whole, right? The more well-rounded professionals are in our industry, the more uniform we can make that, the more value we add and more legitimacy to our field.
Yeah. How do you go about doing that?
I mean, so for me, it's funny. So one thing I was thinking about as I was getting ready for this chat with you is just um, so at the SEGD conference in Portland this year in 2022, I participated as a mentor in the Young Designers Summit. And I met with a variety of very lovely young designers who had a lot of questions about how to get hired, how to get into the industry, what things do I need to know. And I love participating in the young designer, and I have for quite a few years in a row participated on some level, either with portfolio reviews or the SEGD Vanguards or the Young Designer Summit with the conferences. And it's super rewarding to meet fresh designers coming in and hear what their questions are. I would say this year, I noticed a trend that really struck me in the different mentor sessions that I participated in. Many people who were new to our industry or trying to break in from another adjacent field like graphic design, industrial design, architecture, were asking, what software do I need to know? They were like, should I go learn 3D Max? Should I be an expert in SketchUp? Should I do this training or that training? And in my mind, I was like, don't focus on software, focus on critical thinking and design thinking, because I can teach technical skills. I can teach someone how to detail for documentation. I can teach someone on how I would do a submittal review, even if it's different from others. Those are all very easy teachable skills. Even software like Revit or CAD tools or modeling softwares, these are all things that we can teach in a short period of time. The thing that's difficult to teach is design thinking, right? So I often think about the design thinking as the why and the design programs or techniques as the how. So the why is the most difficult part to teach, and it's the part that I'm most focused on when I'm recruiting someone new, whether they're coming from an adjacent field or straight out of school, is like, can this person think conceptually? Can they then understand how to express that concept within a three-dimensional environment, within the built environment? I'm often looking at graphic designers who have a history in traditional graphic design and branding, marketing, that kind of stuff, or illustration, and they're thinking in 2 dimensions, right? Their stuff is executed. The how is on a page, on a print, on a web page, on a mobile, on a video. It's not immersive. It's not in the built environment. And I find that some designers coming from that route, they can either think in 3 dimensions or they really can't see it. And it's almost like being colorblind. So for me, that's what I'm looking for more than anything else when I'm looking to hire is, can this person think in 3 dimensions? Do they have that design thinking, that like able to create a concept and a story? Because there's so many different ways you could tell the story. That's the how, right? So I forget where we're going with this question, but that's what I'm looking for with sort of bringing people on board. And what I'm looking for more often than not is not how expert are you at SketchUp? Because if you don't know why you're drawing the thing in that technical program, then it doesn't matter how good you are at it and how tight your technical skills are if you're not able to think of the big picture. Now, of course, our field is broad and there are people who specialize in technical drawing and execution of that stuff and maybe not so much on the creative. But when we're talking about a generalist within our field, I think that the why, the design thinking, that I can articulate a concept, I can imagine how it could be immersive within a built environment. Those are the most critical things. So at the Young Designer Summit, I found myself encouraging people to, no, don't take a 12-hour course in SketchUp. I don't care. If we together determine you need that, then we'll pay you to do that. Instead, find a way to transition your 2D concept design, strategy, whatever it is, into a 3D environment, even if it's fake, you know? So I feel like that's a more worthwhile endeavor when you're looking for a job or looking to break into EGD as a field, is find a way to show those hiring managers, those recruiters, that you can think in 3 dimensions, that you have those critical thinking skills around, okay, this was the concept. My real project was a brochure and a website and some product branding. I'm going to go one step further because I'm trying to break into a new field. I'm going to apply it to maybe a stock photo or elevation of a built environment so that I can show you I can take it to that next step. That's what I would love to see more than, I did a SketchUp class, I've learned CAD tools, I can teach that stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Being able to translate things that are traditionally 2 dimensions into the 3rd dimension, and even, digitally doing it in the 3rd dimension and then trying to apply it to actual conditions is another huge leap.
Yes.
But I guess
and often at a junior level, this is like, for the young designers, there were many coming in at a junior level who were like, what do I need to study? And at someone coming on board at a junior level, I expect them to know nothing when it comes to EGD, but they do need to have like core fundamentals either in architecture or graphic design, and then an eye for the rest of it. And so that's the hardest part. With our talent acquisition team here at IA, I often tell them, like, don't send me the CV, just send me the portfolio link. I just want to look, I can tell within 30 seconds whether someone can think in 3 dimensions or not. And that's why I kind of encourage those junior folks from the Young Designer Summit, like, spend time investing in examples on your portfolio that show you can think in 3 dimensions. If you want to work in a field that's based in the built environment, that's where you spend your time in prepping for that job hunt, and not in the technical side, unless you're only looking for technical work.
Were there any other interesting questions that you noticed from the young designers?
I mean, there's always a very robust conversation around how did you get to where you are. A lot of people are curious about that. And I think that that's a commonality within our industry because we all come from different entry points, right? Architecture, industrial design, interior design, graphic design, other. There's always a lot of interest in like, okay, what did you study? How did you get to where you are? What's your work experience been? So those are always great conversations and fuel a lot of good conversations and additional questions. And I mentioned the like technical skills versus critical design thinking because that was a big theme this year in particular. I heard it over and over and over again of people saying, should I learn SketchUp? Should I learn CAD tools? Should I go and do this? And to me, those are all come second. That's the how. And I'm looking for someone who understands the why.
Why do you think that's such a common question for people to ask?
I think because it's a tangible thing, much more so than critical design thinking. Like, how do you define that? What does that even mean? It could mean something different for each person who's doing the recruiting, whereas technical skills are really easy to sort of put a parameter around and say, okay, I understand this completely, and it's more widely defined.
Makes sense. Are there any other things when you say people have a curiosity, can you expand a little more what you mean by that?
Oh, like people who are entering our field?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of folks who are really linear thinkers and that think, okay, this is architecture, this is what it involves, and they're not super comfortable with blurring the boundaries, right, between architecture and interiors and graphics and experiential and creative technology. And I think the folks who thrive in our industry are the ones who are hungry to blur the boundaries, who aren't held back by, well, I didn't go to architecture school. Well, so what? You can still work within architecture within your field and just work with your team. Other team members will have the expertise that you're missing, and together you can build something maybe greater than either discipline would be on its own. So I think it's just a comfort level with blurring the boundaries and living in the unknown a little bit that I think is a excellent perspective to have if you're trying to thrive within experiential design.
Is there anything else that top of mind for you?
Um, I think I think that the nature of our industry being so undefined is can be a real positive in that we don't have any rules. We can invent and create and be much maybe more innovative than our peers in more established disciplines can be because there is no rule book. At the same time, I look forward to next steps in our profession and in our field where we can build in some additional layers of best practice, minimum standards, you kind of a certification or qualification system where we can help those folks who super duper knew what they're doing to be recognized as such and to give the young designers coming in sort of a path to success. Whereas right now, that mentor based industry, like you said, leaves a lot unknown, and that can shake people's confidence sometimes. So I think there's a fine balance. You don't want to make it too regimented, but at the same time, some more structure as we move forward and evolve our industry as a whole, I think is going to be a really positive thing.